Stephanie Keller.
And I'm Michael Taylor Gray.
With NewsWrap, a summary of some of the news in or affecting LGBTQ communities around the world for the week ending February 20th, 2021. The government of Jamaica is violating the constitutional rights of its LGBTQ citizens by maintaining its laws banning gay male sex, according to a ruling by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. It's the Commission's first decision against anti-queer laws and could set a precedent for the entire Caribbean region. The Commission said that Jamaica's 1864 Offenses Against the Person Act infringed on the rights to humane treatment, equal protection before the law, privacy and freedom of movement, and residence as enshrined in the American Convention on Human Rights. It recommended that the law be repealed and that protections against homophobic discrimination be enacted. The decision was issued in September of 2019, but the Commission kept it confidential until February 17th. Two Jamaican claimants who have been forced into exile were represented in the case by the legal team of the UK-based Human Dignity Trust. Gareth Henry had been active with JFLAG, the Jamaica Forum for Lesbians, All Sexuals, and Gays. He was violently attacked several times, culminating in 2008 with a harrowing scene when he was chased down by a mob of 200 and then beaten in front of his assailants by a policeman who had been called to help him. That same year, lesbian Simone Edwards was shot several times outside her home by a homophobic gang who were targeting her and her gay brother. Edwards lost a kidney and part of her liver. She sought asylum in the Netherlands. Henry received asylum in Canada and works for the Rainbow Railroad, helping other LGBTQ refugees. He told writers, "All my life, people have told me that who I am and who I love is wrong. Now, for the first time ever, I finally feel I am right." The Human Dignity Trust's Taya Braun called the ruling a highly significant step forward that must now accelerate the repeal of these stigmatizing and discriminatory laws. However, the Commission's rulings are not binding, and Jamaica has not followed any of its recommendations up to this point. The government has made no comment on the Commission's latest decision. JFLAG has expressed its eagerness to dialogue with the country's leaders about how to relieve the oppression of LGBTQ people.
A lesbian couple seeking asylum in Finland to protect their son from persecution in their native Russia has had their claim vindicated by the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. The committee found on February 17 that Finnish authorities had failed to adequately take the best interests of the child as a primary consideration when assessing their author's asylum request based on his mother's sexual orientation, and to protect him against a real risk of irreparable harm in case of return to the Russian Federation. The little boy had innocently outed his mother's when he was in kindergarten. This is around the time Russia's regional no promo homo laws against just about anything pro-LGBTQ were emerging, ahead of the passage of the national law in 2013. School staff started mistreating the child, berating his family, hitting him, allowing other children to bully him, even going so far as to give him food he was allergic to. When the youngster became anxious about school to the point of being suicidal, his mothers decided it was time to flee. Finland does offer asylum to those persecuted on the basis of sexual orientation. However, the discrimination and ostracism the child faced was not considered to rise to the level of persecution, and the request was denied. The family was forced to return to Russia. Their case was taken up by an army of international rights groups, rallied by the International Lesbian and Gay Association, or ILGA. ILGA World and ILGA Europe were joined by the International Commission of Jurists, Child Rights International Network, and the Network of European LGBTIQ Families Associations. The groundbreaking decision marks the first time a UN asylum-related case has involved a child at risk because of their mother's sexual orientation. Finland was found to have violated several articles of the Convention on the Rights of the Child and is obliged to provide an effective reparation, including adequate compensation. ILGA Europe's head of litigation, Arpi Avatisyan, called this an important decision, setting out necessary standards for the protection of children in LGBTI families who are at heightened risk of discrimination, especially in countries like Russia, where LGBTI people face stigmatization and hostilities in their everyday lives. Ilga World's statement expresses the hope that the family will be able to resettle in Finland to finally have a happy and safe life.
In other news from Ilga Europe, the organization's 10th annual review, released this week, warns that queer progress is increasingly fragile and should not be taken for granted. It stresses that the rise of the homophobic right is not limited to Poland and Hungary, and that verbal and physical violence against LGBTQ people is spreading across the region. Ilga Europe's review also finds that the COVID-19 pandemic has been just as threatening to the lives and rights of LGBTQ people as for other marginalized groups. Many have been forced to move back in with hostile families, and many have been overlooked by government relief programs. Ever-popular political scapegoating is now becoming rampant, and now a few religious leaders have pointed the coronavirus finger at sexual minority communities. Ilga Europe Executive Director Eveline Paradis says in the conclusion of the report, "With this review, our message to governments and institutions is that we have to acknowledge how fragile the situation is for LGBTI people across Europe and Central Asia. It is essential to take bold and decisive action at multiple levels so that the human rights of LGBTI people and all their diversity will continue to advance across the region, and the promise of equality will be experienced in their lived realities."
Fresh from his star turn as a House impeachment manager in the trial of former U.S. President Donald Trump, gay Rhode Island Representative David Cicilline reintroduced the Equality Act on February 18th. If enacted, the measure would add sexual orientation and gender identity to existing national civil rights laws and prohibit discrimination in employment, housing, education, public accommodations, and more. The bill is set for a vote in the House on February 23rd. It's expected to pass there, as it did in 2019. However, even with a new Democratic Party-controlled Senate, there are no guarantees. Ending the debate on the bill would still require 60 votes to break a filibuster. Equality Act proponents were hoping for the support of Utah Senator Mitt Romney to help draw other Republicans, but he has now announced his opposition. The famously Mormon ex-presidential candidate cited the bill's lack of what he considers strong religious liberty protections. He has also raised the misleading specter of the participation of transgender students in school sports, since the act would cover discrimination in education. LGBTQ advocates have no intention of giving in on that issue to possibly curry favor with anyone. National Women's Law Center transgender spokesperson Jillian Brandstetter told the Washington Blade, "The broad-based coalition organizations that support the Equality Act will proudly and loudly tell you that trans women are women. And if you apply an asterisk, if you buy into the idea that a trans woman athlete, if she wins, is apparently cheating, then you are applying an asterisk to the idea that she is a woman and therefore on equal footing with other women."
Finally, 2 reports out this week demonstrate why that kind of proud and loud support for trans people's lives is needed now more than ever. The first comes from Brazil, where President Jair Bolsonaro arrogantly flaunts his homophobia and transphobia. The advocacy group National Association of Transvestites and Transsexuals finds that at least 175 transgender people were murdered in 2020. That's 1 every 2 days. The slain were among the most marginalized groups. 78% were black, 56% were young, and 72% were sex workers. Their deaths were among the most brazen killings. 7 out of 10 occurred in a public place. Their identities were more hidden, as many have been misgendered and dead-named in police reports and the press. 2020 was the deadliest year for trans people in the U.S., and trans visibility suffered a similar demise. In their analysis of broadcast and cable TV news, the progressive research group Media Matters found less than an hour's worth of coverage of anti-transgender violence. The issue got 31 minutes on MSNBC and just another 10 minutes on CNN and Fox News combined. Broadcast networks ABC, CBS, and NBC managed to squeeze in a total of 13 minutes. Only 9 of the news stories about anti-trans violence mentioned a murdered trans person by name.
That's NewsWrap, global queer news with attitude. for the week ending February 20th, 2021. Follow the news in your area and around the world. An informed community is a strong community.
NewsWrap is recording remotely during the COVID-19 emergency. It's written by Greg Gordon, edited by Lucia Chappelle, produced by Brian DeShazer, and brought to you by you.
Help keep us in ears around the world at thiswayout.org, where you can also read the text of this newscast and much more.
And you can listen to NewsWrap each week by subscribing to our This Way Out radio channel on YouTube. For This Way Out, I'm Melanie Keller. Stay healthy.
And I'm Michael Taylor Gray. Stay safe.